Well, hello and welcome to today's update and video devotion time. I'll share a few words with you in a moment from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 20. I want to read a story to you there and then give you some what I believe are helpful insights from that story. But let me just update where we are. This coming Sunday will be a different schedule for us, as we've been talking about for a couple of weeks now. We're going back to our normal schedule. That is, we'll have two services. The first will be at 8:15. That's what we call our blended worship service. It is comprised of praise and hymns. It will involve a limited choir and limited orchestra, but its flow will be like our previous blended service prior to the shelter in from the pandemic. Then at 10:50, we will have our full contemporary service, and which will be again like the contemporary service prior to the shelter in of the pandemic. And so you might want to make your reservations this week based on whichever particular style that you are most accustomed to or most desire. And we don't mind whichever one it is, you just make that call. But we do need you to make reservations. Again, we do have a limited capacity. I think we'll be fine. We have been so far. Our crowds seem to have picked up a little bit each week, but please contact our office, 792-9406, and they'll help you make reservations for whichever of those services, or you can go online to our website at www.rbcdothan.org. Click on the link at the top of the home page about our reopening processes, and that'll take you to a place on our website where you can register for one of the two services. But again, I want to remind you, we've been in 8 o'clock and 11 o'clock services. We will now be back in our former schedule, which is 8:15 blended service, 10:50 contemporary service. So make note of that if you will. We had another wonderful day yesterday in worship, and look forward to seeing you here this coming Sunday. Again, keep your antenna up as we update things from time to time this way, as well as through the various different ministries. We are slowly re-engaging some of those. Our connection groups, though not in full force, will slowly begin to open up. And so just stay tuned in, and we'll keep you current through mediums like this. And so I hope that you'll be listening up for what's coming in the days ahead. Today I want to read you a story that Jesus gives us out of Matthew's Gospel, chapter 20. Let me just read the story. It's a bit lengthy, but let me read it to you, and then I want to come back and give you a few observations that I think might be helpful. Have you ever thought sometimes that life isn't fair? I bet you have, because most people have. Or sometimes people have even said, well, I don't think God is fair. We hear that a lot of times in our world today. And we hear that from people who really don't know God or don't know much about God. Sometimes even Christians make the mistake of saying, well, God just isn't fair. And so Jesus gives us a story to help us understand a little bit about the character of God and the nature of God as it relates to what's fair and what isn't fair. Listen, it goes like this in chapter 20, beginning in verse 1. For the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. And after agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And going out about the third hour, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And to them he said, you go into the vineyard too, and whatever is right I will give you. And so they went. And going out about the 6th hour and then the 9th hour, he did the same. And about the 11th hour he went out, and he found others standing, and he said to them, why do you stand here idle all day? And they said to him, because no one has hired us. And so he said to them, you go into the vineyard as well. And when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, call the laborers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last up to the first. And when those hired about the 11th hour came, each of them received a denarius. Now, when those hired first came, and they thought that they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. And on receiving it, they grumbled at the master of the house, saying, these last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat. But he replied to one of them, friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last worker as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? So the last will be first, and the first last. It's an interesting story that Jesus tells because it does cut to the heart of this fairness idea that sometimes we feel like, well, somebody didn't do as much as me and they received as much as me or more than me, and not just in monetary matters, in life in general. And so Jesus is trying to help us understand, first of all, that He is gracious if He gives us anything, and secondly, that it is up to Him in terms of how He gives what He gives. And that means gifts and abilities, talents, time, treasures. All of those things are sovereignly bestowed upon us. And because that is true, we should be careful when we say, well, God is just not fair. The fact is, we really don't want God to be fair. If God is fair, what we get is not at all what we deserve. But God is gracious and God is merciful, and this story reflects the grace and mercy of God. For example, you may be one of those who feel like you have done more than everyone else and everyone else got as much as you did. But there are other matters in which you may be the one that did little and got as much as someone else, again, in some different capacity or some other matter. Well, that's what's going on here. When you are the recipient of more than you deserve, we call it grace. And when you receive what you've come to understand, then that's called fairness. And Jesus, thank goodness, deals with us in grace and mercy more than fairness, and I'm glad for that. But let me give you 3 lessons that I think we glean from this story. The first is this: you and I must learn to be content with God's gift. All of us are gifted differently. We've been given things that, for us and for our design that work. God has bestowed different gifts to different people, different talents, different personalities, and all of that is related to what God expects of us. We are to use those things for His glory. We're not to worry about is someone else using theirs. We're not to worry about is someone else getting more response out of their gifts or getting more out of their, or shouldn't I have the gifts they have? That's not our concern. Our concern is that we must be content with the gifts that God has given us. And then you won't compare yourself with others. In fact, I would encourage you sometime in your prayer time to just simply say to God, God, thank you for the way I'm made. The scripture says I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Thank you for making me the way you've made me. Help me to discover how to use the gifts you've given me in such a way to fulfill the purpose you created me for, and not to worry about having somebody else's gifts or being identified by someone else's gifts. The second lesson that we learn, I think, from verse 12 is that we must be committed to God's work. You see, our devotion to serve God must not be determined by what someone else is doing or not doing. These folks became jealous because they felt like someone else didn't do what they did. We should never concern ourselves with the other person. What are they doing? They're going to be responsible. They'll be accountable to God. And we need not worry about that. But we must be committed to God's work. We have to be content with the gifts that God has given to us, to use them for His glory, not worrying about other people's gifts or not wishing that I had other gifts. And then secondly, we must be committed to God's work. God has put us here to serve Him with those gifts, and it is not our concern about how someone else serves Him. The question that we must lay down our heads upon our pillows each night and answer is, God, did I do today what you desire for me to do? Was I fully committed to your purpose and your agenda for my life? And so if I can answer that with the answer yes, then I don't need worry about those around me. Did they do what they were supposed to do? In fact, I want to be a model of a person who took the gifts God has given me and used them the way God designed me to use them. I don't want to try to copy someone else's, but I want to be committed to the work of God and let God settle the accounts at the end. And then that leads me to the third thing. And that is, we must be comfortable with God's will. All right? Are you following this? We must be content with God's gifts. We must be committed to God's work. And then last, we must be comfortable with God's will. God's will is good for you. But it means you must live life on God's terms. Did you notice at the end here, he said, am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? He was saying simply this, you belong to me. And that's the lesson. We belong to him. And he is allowed to do whatever he wants with us because we are his. Now, he deals again with us in grace. But we are to live his will out and his agenda instead of trying to get God to live out of our agenda. It means that we live on his terms, not he on our terms. The debate here really from those who grumbled was, we think the terms are not fair. But the fact is, God establishes the terms. And the terms are more than fair. The terms are oftentimes gracious, as they were in this case with those that he continued to hire throughout the day. And so we have to distinguish between what is fair and what is grace. I always would err on the side of grace. Always look for the grace of God. Use your gifts for his glory. Commit yourself to his work and be comfortable in his will. If you'll do that, you'll be able to relax. You won't be comparing yourself to others. You won't be trying to accomplish a mission God didn't design you to accomplish. You'll find peace in your soul because this is a matter between you and God, not between you and your fellow believers or fellow friends. It's about you and God. It's about you living out of the purpose. It's about you pleasing God. If you get those three things, you'll understand what Jesus is trying to teach us in this passage today. All right? So finally, I reiterate, here's what we are to do. We must be content with the gifts that God has given us. We must be committed to the work that God has entrusted to us. And we must be comfortable with God's will. If you get those three things, God will be able to use you greatly. And I hope that's an encouragement to you today. Now, before we go, I just remind you again of our Last Day series is a resource that we've been making available to people. Many folks have requested the series, 12 messages. Volume 1, I call it, because I'm not finished with that series. We'll come back down the road and complete a Volume 2, more messages, 12 messages on are we living in the last days and what are the signs and indicators of the times around us, among other messages, 12 messages, outlines. You can have it in CD or DVD. CDs for a gift of $40, DVD for a gift of $55. Contact us here at the church office, 792, area code 334-792-9406, or go on our website and send us an email and request the Last Day series, and we will take care of that for you. Then there's a free resource that we want to put in your hand. It's called Common Questions and Biblical Insights to Adversity and Trials and Storms. And in it, I just answer some of the big questions. What is God up to in difficulties? And what is God trying to achieve? And does God cause them? And how do I respond during those times? And that information is contained, those questions I answer in this booklet, and we'd love to make that available to you free. All you have to do is call us and contact us here at Ridgecrest, and we'll be happy to get that to you. Hope it'll be helpful as well. Thanks again for checking this video out today, and I hope you'll be encouraged in the Lord. Strengthen yourself as David did in the Lord, and I look forward to seeing you here this coming Sunday. Be sure to make your reservations. I love you. God bless you. We'll be back tomorrow.